How does a simple argument on a highway turn into my wife abandoning me at a dead train station with no phone and no wallet? How did pretending to be a blind stranger's son in front of his driver end with my wife facing me on a hotel stage, while lawyers read out the price of leaving me behind? This is how everyone decided I was weak, and how the richest man in the city helped me show them I was not. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Glen Ward, and I never thought a simple drive home would end with me standing alone at a forgotten train station, holding an overnight bag like a confused tourist who got off at the wrong stop in his own life. That morning started like many others with my wife, Maya. We were driving back from a weekend retreat upstate. She had wanted it for weeks. She said we needed new pictures for her social media and her event brand. And a cabin, trees, a rented hot tub, a car she could post. I agreed because I always agreed, as long as I could still check my work emails at night and make sure Monday's routes were ready. I work as a logistics director for a delivery company. It is not a glamorous job, but I am good at it. I know where every truck is. I know which driver will get stuck in traffic and which warehouse will forget a pallet. My mind is full of schedules, maps, and little details that no one posts about online. For years, Maya said she loved that about me. She said I made her feel safe, like there was always a plan. That day, she did not sound like she loved it. The car was quiet for a long stretch of road. Trees passed by. She scrolled on her phone, taking short videos of the view, checking comments. I kept my eyes on the highway. Then a notification sound came from her phone, and she laughed in a way that made my shoulders tense. It was a high, sharp laugh, the one she used when something or someone impressed her. She started talking about another couple from the retreat, a young guy with a fast car. She said his business was already making more in a month than mine made in a year. She said he was hungry and bold. She compared his big plans with my steady job and my careful little savings. She did not say it as a joke. She said it like a slow verdict. I told her that I was happy for him, but I was not in the same line of work. I reminded her that my job gave us a stable base. I tried to keep my voice calm. I told her that I did not want to put our house and our future on the line for risky schemes just so she could post bigger numbers. She did not like that answer. She began to list all the things she wanted to do with her event agency. More staff, more equipment, a studio space downtown, higher-end venues. She said she could triple her rates if she had the right image. She said I was holding her back with my slow thinking and my fear of risk. She did not yell, but her words were sharp and steady. Each one cut a little deeper than the last. I reminded her of the times I had helped her. I talked about the nights I drove her banners to venues, the deposits I had paid for my account, the contracts I had signed for equipment leases because her credit history was short and the companies wanted someone solid. I did not say it to throw it in her face. I said it because I needed her to remember I was not dead weight hanging on her dreams. I had been the quiet engine behind a lot of it. She said those things were basic support, what any partner should do. She said it in a way that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel, like my effort was a default, not a choice. As we kept talking, the air in the car grew dense. Every mile felt heavier. Her voice kept circling back to one idea. I was safe, but safe was not enough. She wanted speed now. She wanted to be seen at bigger places, with bigger people. To her, I was starting to look like the background of her photos, not the partner in the frame. The road opened up near an exit for a small town with a train icon on the sign. Out of nowhere, she told me to pull off the highway. She said she needed a break, that she felt trapped in the car. I took the exit without arguing. In my head, I told myself she just needed air and a short walk. We had done this before, after arguments. We would cool down, talk, drive on. We followed signs until we reached a small upstate train station, the kind of place you see in an old postcard. One low building, a short platform, a flickering light over a bench. There was a parking lot with only a few cars. It was early evening, but the place already felt like night. I parked close to the building. She got out quickly, closing the door a little harder than needed. I turned off the engine, took a breath, and stepped out too. The air was cool and smelled like wet leaves and cold metal. I walked around the car and asked if she wanted to talk. She did not answer my question. She started talking about everything at once, our life, her career, how she felt stuck between my routine and her goals. She said she was tired of explaining herself to someone who did not get her world. She said that when she looked at me, she saw a man waiting in a line that never moved. Her voice was not loud enough to draw a crowd, but it carried through the empty parking lot. A ticket clerk inside the station looked up once, then looked back down. A couple on the far side of the platform sat with their bags, pretending not to listen. I tried to stay calm. I told her I understood she wanted more. I said I did not want to stand in her way. I only wanted us not to gamble what we had built together. I offered to sit inside the station and plan numbers with her. I said we could look at what we could invest without putting our home at risk. She shook her head and said she was tired of planning small. She said she needed partners who could think bigger than I did. She said I just did not fit the picture anymore. Those were the words that stung the most. Not fit the picture. Like I was a piece of furniture that did not match the new decor. Then she did something that still makes my stomach tighten when I think about it. She walked back to the car, opened the passenger door, and took her bag from the back seat. She looked inside the glove box, took out her sunglasses, and closed it again. My wallet and phone were in there. She did not touch them. She just left them where they were. She came back around, stood a few steps away from me, and told me she needed time and distance. She said I should figure out how to get home. She said if I could not even handle that, we had a bigger problem. She turned and headed for the driver's side. I stared at her, thinking she was making a cruel point, that she would stop and look back. She did not. She got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. The taillights glowed red and then grew smaller as she turned onto the road. In less than a minute, she was gone. The silence that followed felt unreal. No engine noise, no traffic, just the soft buzz of the station lights and the distant sound of a train far away, on some other track that did not touch my life right then. I stood there with my overnight bag in one hand and my car keys in the other. The car was gone. My phone, my wallet, my ID, all gone with it. The ticket office door was locked. A printed schedule on the wall said the last train to the city had already passed earlier. The next one would be in the morning. I walked inside the small waiting room anyway, as if something could change if I checked it again. A vending machine with an out-of-order sticker stood in the corner. A payphone hung on the wall, but its cord had been cut. There was a bench with old flyers stacked on it. No staff, no sound. I stepped back out to the platform and looked at the map. The city was 50 miles away. I knew the distance because my mind automatically translated the route lines into miles and hours. 50 miles, on foot, in dress shoes, with a half-full bag. It was possible, but not smart. And yet, for a moment, I really thought I might do it. I did not want to call anyone and explain this. I did not want to be the man who admitted his wife had just driven off with his life in her glove box. I walked to the edge of the parking lot and looked down the road. Trees, darkness, no sidewalk, just a narrow lane and a thin shoulder. It would be a long, cold walk. I told myself I could at least start, then see. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. It was a soft sound, almost polite. I turned and saw an older man sitting on the bench under the light. I had noticed him earlier without really seeing him. Now I saw the white cane leaning against his leg, the dark glasses, the calm way he faced the open space, not the building. He raised his head slightly in my direction. He said he could not see me, but he had heard everything. He said he heard the way my wife spoke, the way the car left, the way my steps sounded afterward. He said he could tell I was standing at the edge of the lot, looking down the road and counting in my head. I did not know what to say, so I just nodded, then realized he could not see that. I told him he was right. I said I was thinking about walking home. I explained that my phone and wallet were in the car that was now somewhere on the highway. He asked me how far the city was from the station. I told him roughly 50 miles. I said it in the flat tone I use for delivery routes, as if it were just another number. He let out a small breath and said that was a long walk for a man who had just had his whole life shaken. He told me that if I tried, I would not just be tired, I would be putting myself in real danger on those dark roads. He said I did not sound like a fool, so he hoped I would not act like one. Then he said something that felt strange in that empty station. He told me he had a private driver on the way to pick him up. He said the driver knew him well, but had not seen his real family in years. He said that if I was willing, I could pretend to be his son for one ride back to the city. The driver would not question it, and I could get home safely. I hesitated. It sounded odd, almost like a trick. Then I looked at the map again, at the thin line of road, and felt the ache already starting in my legs and in my chest. I told him I did not want to be a problem. I said I did not even know his name. He smiled in my direction and told me his name was Arthur. His voice was steady and calm. He said I was not a problem. He said my wife would regret leaving me like this, because she had left me in the path of the richest man in the city. Part of me wanted to laugh. Part of me wanted to ask 100 questions. Instead, I just stood there for a moment, feeling small, tired, and strangely lighter. For the first time since the car pulled away, I was not completely alone. Arthur reached out his hand toward the sound of my breathing. I stepped closer and took it. His grip was firm. He patted the bench beside him, and I sat down with my bag at my feet. We waited together in the cold light of the station while the night settled around us. Arthur and I sat on that cold bench for a few quiet minutes before the car arrived. He did not ask what I wanted to share. He just waited. That made it easier somehow. I started talking because silence felt heavier than words. I told him that morning was not the first time Maya had talked to me like that. It was just the first time she had done it in such a final way, with the car moving away and the station fading behind red lights. I told him I met Maya 5 years earlier at an event that almost fell apart. She was not Maya the brand back then. She was just a young coordinator with a laptop that kept losing connection and a rental company that sent the wrong items. I was the quiet operations guy from the delivery side. The company had sent me to fix a routing mistake. I remembered how she looked that day, hair tied up in a messy knot, phone in one hand, a clipboard in the other, eyes wide as she tried to hold back frustrated tears. The hall was half empty of chairs, and the fancy floral pieces were stuck at a warehouse. The original driver had called in sick, and no one at the warehouse seemed to know where the backup truck was. I walked in with a cheap work jacket and my tablet. The hall manager had rolled his eyes when he saw me. He had asked if this was the whole rescue team. I did not answer. I started checking the order numbers and calling the drivers directly. I knew which driver might be nearby and which side streets they could take. While everyone else talked about how bad the situation was, I found the pallets, reassigned a driver, and pulled another truck off a lighter route. Within an hour, chairs and flowers were rolling in through the side door. Maya watched the empty hall turn into something that looked like her plan again. Her shoulders dropped. Her hands stopped shaking. After the guests arrived and the lights came up, she came over to me with 2 glasses of soda from the bar. She thanked me. She said no one had ever just fixed things like that without a big show. She said I was like a calm center in a storm. I liked hearing that. I had not been anyone's calm center before. We started seeing each other after that. It was simple at first. We met at small cafes, walked in the park, watched old movies. She worked long days for other planners. I worked long days directing routes and solving problems. She talked about wanting her own agency. I talked about wanting to pay off my loans and feel like I wasn't always one crisis away from losing everything. Back then, she said she liked that I was steady. She joked that I was born 50 years old in my mind. I laughed along. I did not mind. Being old in that way kept food on the table and late fees away from our door. When she finally quit her job to start her own company, I was the one who pushed her to take the step. She sat at our small kitchen table with spreadsheets open on her laptop and circles drawn around scary numbers. I remembered taking her hand and telling her that if she was careful and we planned it right, we could handle a small period of risk. So we did. We cut some of our costs. I moved some of my savings. I signed for the equipment lease because her credit score was still thin from earlier debts. I signed for the first storage space because the landlord preferred my work record and age. I was proud to stand behind her. I felt like we were building something together. For a while, it worked like a good route. Orders came in, events went well, and clients praised her. She had the smile and the energy. I had the calendar and the calculator. We were a good team. Then her image started to grow online. Photos from events, videos of perfect table settings, posts about dream clients, and dream days. She started to meet people who lived in a different world than mine, people who drove cars that cost more than our apartment, people who liked being seen in certain places. The first time I felt small was at a rooftop bar she loved. It was a place with glass walls and a narrow pool no one swam in. The view was the main thing. She had brought me there to meet some of her new contacts. I wore my best shirt and tried to stand like I fit in. I remembered how the music was loud, but not loud enough to cover certain sentences. One of the men at the table looked at my simple watch and asked if I was the driver waiting to take her home. He said it in a joking way, but everyone laughed. Maya laughed too. She corrected him and said I was her husband, but she added that I kept things grounded and that I was not into this world. It sounded like she was proud of me and also slightly tired of me at the same time. Later that night, when we were alone, I told her the comment had stung. She said I was being too sensitive. She said people in that circle joked like that, and I needed to be more comfortable with a little teasing. I tried to let it go. I told myself my pride was less important than her feeling free to move in her new world. But the pattern did not stop there. At her events, people often assumed I was staff. They asked me to move boxes, shift chairs, carry cables. I did it because I understood that work, and I knew it would help Maya. When I introduced myself as her husband, some people raised their eyebrows as if they expected someone with more polish. She never openly corrected them. She never said I was the one who had signed half the contracts that made the event possible. She did not say I was the one doing late-night drives to pick up forgotten pieces. She just moved on to the next guest. In the car with Arthur, I told him all this. I switched between the past and the present, trying to explain how a woman who had once seen me as a partner now left me at a station like lost luggage. I kept my voice even, but my hands twisted the strap of my bag without me noticing. Arthur did not interrupt much. He asked short questions. He asked who held the lease on the equipment. I told him my name was on it. He asked who paid the down payment on the joint apartment. I told him I had used my savings and a bonus from my company. He asked if I kept records. I explained that I had simple Excel sheets with dates and amounts, because my mind liked order. He nodded slowly, as if he could see something I could not. He said my world was not as small as I thought. He said when you know where things come from and where they go, you hold more power than people who only see the surface. As the car moved closer to the city, my memories shifted to my office. It was not a fancy place, just an open floor with desks, screens showing maps, and the constant ring of phones. I had been there for 18 years, long enough to see bosses come and go, long enough to fix 3 software systems when they broke, long enough to know which clients would pay late and which drivers needed a softer voice. At work, people respected what I did, but they did not see it as special. I had become the person everyone relied on, but no one celebrated. When something went wrong, they called me. When something went right, they thanked the brand. There were times when I stayed late to help Maya with her own problems. I sat in a quiet corner of the warehouse with my laptop, matching her event dates with truck routes so she could get better rates. I wrote simple sheets for her to track inventory. She often sent quick messages saying I was a lifesaver. Over time, those messages became shorter, then rare. When her following grew, she started talking in a new way about her path. She gave online interviews where she described building her business from nothing and with no support. The first time I watched one, I sat on our couch holding the remote. She talked about a girl with a dream and no one backing her. I looked at the wall where our joint lease hung in a frame and tried to reconcile her voice with the document. When I asked her about it later, she said it was just a story for marketing and I should not take it so literally. She said people liked simple origin stories. They did not want to hear about shared accounts or steady partners. It hurt, but I let that go too. I told myself it was just part of her job. In the car, telling Arthur everything in order made it feel less like a fog and more like a straight line, a line that had slowly moved from gratitude to taking me for granted, then to erasing me. He asked about my family. I told him my father had been strict and careful with money. He had made me sign a short agreement before the wedding. Nothing fancy, just something that said we both understood what we brought into the marriage. At the time, I thought it was old-fashioned. I signed it to give him peace of mind. I barely remembered what was in it. Arthur tilted his head and said a person like my father might have done more for me than I knew. He suggested I find that document again. We passed the sign that marked the edge of the city. The roads grew wider, the lights brighter. I could see the reflection of tall buildings in the car window. My shoulders slumped a little, as if the whole strange evening was folding back into my normal life. But something had shifted. Saying everything out loud to a stranger, especially a stranger who listened without taking sides, made the pattern clear. Maya had not changed overnight. She had moved one step at a time away from me. I had helped her take some of those steps without realizing it. I thought about the retreat we had just left. I remembered one moment there when she had stood in a circle of people, talking about her upcoming New Era event. She spoke about how she was ready to level up, how she was cutting things out of her life that did not match her future. I had been standing a bit behind her, holding 2 drinks. At the time, I had told myself she meant old habits, old fears. Now, in the back of Arthur's car, it occurred to me that she might have meant me. When the car reached the city, the streets looked the same, but I felt like I was viewing them from outside my own life. Lights, shops, people crossing the road with grocery bags and phones in their hands. Everyday scenes while I sat in the back of a silent luxury car with a stranger who knew more about my evening than my own family. Arthur asked the driver to stop near my building. The driver answered in a respectful tone, using Arthur's last name. I caught it clearly now that I was listening. Cole. It sounded familiar, but my brain was too tired to place it. Before I got out, I thanked Arthur. I said I did not know how to repay him. He waved a hand and said I had already paid him with a good story. He added quietly that stories like mine were not rare, but most men hid them until it was too late to do anything. Then he told me to rest and look for the documents my father had made me sign. As I stepped out, he called my name once more and said that if I ever needed to talk, his driver knew how to reach him. Then the door closed and the car pulled away. I went up to our apartment in a kind of daze. The hallway smelled like cooking from another unit. Someone's television was too loud. It was all so normal that it almost convinced me the station had been a bad dream. But when I opened the door and stepped inside, reality caught up. The living room looked the same at first glance. The couch, the TV, the shelf with our old trip souvenirs. But as I walked farther in, I noticed spaces, little empty zones that my mind recognized even before my eyes registered them. A lamp was gone from the corner. 2 of the framed photos were missing from the wall. In the bedroom, the difference was clear. Half the hanging clothes were gone. A few empty hangers swung slightly as if they had just been touched. Her makeup table drawer was open and mostly empty. The jewelry box was gone. On my side of the dresser sat a folded sheet of paper with my name written on it. My stomach tightened as I picked it up and opened it. The note was short. In it, Maya said she was sorry things had to happen this way, but she needed space and time to think. She said she could not keep living the same day over and over. She said driving off at the station had been symbolic, a way to show me that she was serious about needing a change. She wrote that she was staying at a loft downtown with some friends for a while and that we should not contact each other until she reached out. There was no mention of my phone, my wallet, or the fact that she had left me stranded without ID. No apology for that part. I stood in the quiet bedroom holding the note. My first instinct was to call her, but my phone was still in her glove box. I went to the small drawer where we kept old devices and found an older phone. I plugged it in, waited for it to get enough charge, then put in my SIM card from the spare envelope where I kept it after an upgrade. When it finally turned on, a flood of notifications arrived. Messages from coworkers asking if I was okay, from my sister, from friends, and from Maya. She had sent a few texts earlier in the day, when we were still at the retreat, saying we needed to talk seriously after the drive. Later, one simple line, that she would be taking some time away and I should not worry too much. There were also screenshots from people who followed her online. They showed clips from a late-night stream she had done from the loft. In one, she sat on a stylish couch with a ring light, telling her followers she was entering a new era and cutting ties with things that did not match her future. She did not say my name, but she referred to a partner who did not understand her dreams and who wanted to stay small. The comments were full of people praising her courage. My throat felt tight as I watched. It was strange seeing myself as a blurry figure in someone else's story. In her world, I was a weight she had dropped, not a man she had left at a dark station with no way to get home. I slept badly that night. I lay on my half of the bed, staring at the line where her pillows used to be. My mind kept replaying the sound of the car leaving, the sight of the empty parking lot, and Arthur's calm voice telling me it was not smart to walk 50 miles alone in the dark. The next day at work, Liam came to my desk as soon as I sat down. He had seen one of the screenshots. He asked in a low voice if everything was okay. I shrugged and said my wife needed some space. The words felt dry and thin. At lunch, he insisted we go to a small cafe around the corner. It was a simple place with chipped tables and a good coffee smell. We sat in a corner where the noise from the counter covered our voices. I told him what had happened at the station. I kept it factual, like a route report. We left the retreat, argued, she pulled into a station, told me to get out, drove away with my phone and wallet, left a note at home. I did not try to soften it. Liam listened without cutting in. When I finished, he sat back and let out a slow breath. He said that if he had not known me for years, he would think I was telling some kind of story from the internet. Then he shook his head and said that this was beyond a simple argument, that it was cold. He reminded me of all the times he had seen me leave work early to help with her events. He recited details I had almost forgotten. The Friday I drove lights across town after my own shift. The weekend morning I came into the office to print extra contracts for her because her home printer broke. The nights I took her calls at 2 a.m. when a decor supplier missed a delivery. He said he had watched me support her quietly while she climbed. He said he had thought she was a bit ungrateful at times, but he had assumed she knew my value. Now he was not sure she did. He told me I was not some boring extra in her life. He said I was the reason half her shows started on time. Hearing that from someone outside my marriage hit me in a new way. I realized I had been waiting for Maya to acknowledge what I did so badly that I had stopped noticing when other people did. On my way back to the office, my mind went to my father again. I kept thinking about the slightly awkward afternoon when he had sat me down with a stack of papers before the wedding. He had insisted on a simple agreement, nothing extreme, just something that made things clear. At the time, I had thought he did not trust Maya. Now I wondered if he had seen patterns in me, not in her, my habit of giving more than I protected. That evening, as I sat at my desk finishing up a route change, my old phone buzzed with a number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it, then picked up. It was the driver from the night before. He said Mr. Cole was checking on me and asked if I had found my documents. I told him not yet. Then the driver said something that made me sit up straighter. He said Mr. Cole had invited me to dinner at his place the next evening, if I was free. He gave me an address, and my hand paused as I wrote it down. I knew that street. It was one of those high addresses I usually only saw from the ground. The next evening, I stood in front of a tall building of glass and stone, holding a small bottle of decent wine I had picked up as a guest gesture. The doorman greeted me by name and led me to a private elevator. My ears popped slightly as it rose. Arthur's penthouse was large, but not the kind of loud rich you see on screens. The furniture was simple and solid. The windows showed the city spread out like a map. The air smelled of cooking and some light, clean scent I could not name. Arthur was sitting at a table near the window, his cane resting on the chair beside him. He greeted me warmly and introduced me to his assistant, a quiet woman named Sarah, who served us food and then disappeared into another room. Over dinner, he finally told me who he was. I had already guessed from the address and the way people treated him, but hearing it still surprised me. He said he was the founder of Cole Holdings, the group that owned several hotels, including some of the ones Maya always talked about in her dreams. He said he had stepped back from daily management, but people still did what he asked if he cared enough to pick up the phone. He asked more about my work. I told him about the routing system I helped design, the way I could look at a map and see the most efficient patterns, the nights I stayed late to rebuild schedules after storms. He listened with the same focus he had shown at the station. At one point, I mentioned that I felt foolish for ending up at that station with no ID. I said I should have seen the direction things were going in my marriage. I blame myself for not setting firmer lines. Arthur shook his head. He said a calm person is not weak just because they hope for the best. He said some people mistake patience for softness, and they push until they find out there is a limit. His voice stayed gentle, but his words felt like they came from someone who had seen many versions of my story. When dinner finished, he asked Sarah to bring something. She returned with a small, labeled USB drive and placed it in my hand. The label had the name of the train station and a date. Arthur explained that his company provided security services to some transport locations, including that station. He said he had asked his team to pull the cameras and audio from the night before. He made it clear he had not watched all of it. He respected privacy. But he said it was wise for me to have a copy of what happened, just in case. I held the little drive between my fingers. It felt too light for what it might contain. My wife's voice, my own tired answers, the sound of the car leaving. Evidence, not just memory. Arthur said I did not have to decide anything that night. He told me to take it home, rest, and slowly gather my own records. He reminded me again about the old agreement with my father. He suggested I speak to a good lawyer, not to start a fight, but to understand the ground I stood on. As I left the penthouse, the city lights below seemed sharper. The same streets, the same cars. But now I noticed details I had ignored for years. Signs, names of buildings, the quiet presence of systems running behind the surface. For most of my life, I had moved through those systems like a background piece, making sure everything worked for other people. That night, holding a small USB drive in my pocket, I felt a new thought forming in my mind. Maybe it was time to learn how to use those systems for myself, with the same care I used for everyone else. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The city outside the window was still half dark, with only a few lights on in other apartments. For a moment, I lay still and listened to the quiet. No hairdryer in the bathroom, no quick steps in the hallway, no sound of Maya's voice on a call. The space on her side of the bed was still smooth and empty. I got up, made coffee, and took a legal pad from the drawer. I had the small USB drive on the table in front of me. I did not plug it in yet. Instead, I started writing dates. I wrote the day I met Maya at that first event, the day we signed the first lease for her storage space, the day I moved money from my savings to help with her first large wedding job, the date of our wedding, the date my father made me sign that short agreement he had prepared. I kept going, line after line, pulling details from the shelves of my mind. When I finished, I had 2 full pages of key moments. Looking at them in order made the last 5 years feel less like a blur and more like a clear path. I circled the most important ones, the first equipment lease, the apartment deposit, the station date from the night she left me. Then I went to my small home file box and dug through old folders until I found a thin envelope with my father's handwriting. Inside was the document he had created before the wedding. It was not a thick contract, just a few pages. I read it slowly, line by line. It said that each partner would keep what they had brought into the marriage if things ended. It mentioned savings, personal items, and any assets owned before the wedding. It also had a part, written in his careful, old-fashioned way, about how deliberate abandonment of the other partner could affect division of shared assets. At the time, I had signed it with a smile, thinking the words were from another era. Now those lines looked different. The language was simple but firm. It talked about one partner leaving the other without basic means or support on purpose. It was strange and unsettling to see my recent experience match that description point by point. I took a photo of the document and printed a copy at home. The original went back into the envelope. Then I dressed and went into work. At the office, I tried to finish my tasks as usual. Routes needed to be checked, drivers needed answers. I answered questions, adjusted plans. My hands moved almost on their own. Years of habit kept me moving, even as my mind was somewhere else. After lunch, I asked Human Resources for some files. I kept my request calm and simple. I said I needed copies of my employment contract, my bonus letters, and any documents related to the routing system I had helped design. The HR person gave me a long look and asked if everything was all right. I said I was just updating my records. It was the truth. While I waited, I opened my work email and looked through old messages connected to Maya's events. There were many. Requests from her for last-minute delivery changes, confirmations from me about special rates I had negotiated for her, using my contacts in the company. I forwarded all of those to my personal email and saved them in a folder with a quiet, neutral name. By the end of the day, HR sent me scanned copies of my employment agreement and bonus notes. There it was in black and white, my role in designing logistics tools, the special recognition for saving large contracts during crisis times, the stock units I had earned over the years. It felt strange to see my value written down like that, when I had spent so long thinking of myself as replaceable. I printed those too and slid them into a clean folder. That evening, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Arthur had sent me a message with a name, Patricia King. He wrote that she was practical, not dramatic. I liked that description. I called her office, and her assistant offered me a slot 2 days later. In the meantime, I knew I needed financial documents from Maya's side as well. I did not want to break into anything. I did not need secret keys or hidden accounts. I already knew someone who had access to her official files, Rena, the accountant who had been working with Maya's agency for the last year. I had met Rena several times at our kitchen table. She was careful, quiet, always polite. She had once joked that she trusted numbers more than people. I respected that. I sent her a message saying I needed to talk about some past payments I had made into the business. I did not mention the word separation. I just asked if she had time for a coffee near her office. We met at a small shop near the station downtown. She arrived with a laptop bag and a tired look. As we sat down, she asked how I was doing. I could see in her eyes that she knew more than she said. She probably followed Maya online too. I told her the facts in a steady voice. I said Maya had left our shared home and that I was reviewing where my money had gone. I did not insult anyone. I did not make speeches. I just said I needed a clear list of which business payments had come from me personally and which had come from client income. Rena studied my face for a moment. Then she admitted that she had often wondered why I was not officially listed as a partner. She said that from the numbers alone, it looked like there were two owners, one visible, one invisible. She said the invisible one was me. She told me there was an early document Maya had made her file away, a simple paper partnership note with my name on it. She had assumed we had done some private legal work around it. I told her we had not. That document was news to me. Rena looked annoyed in a quiet way when she heard that. She said she would send me copies of all invoices and transfers where my name or our joint account appeared, plus that partnership note. She made it clear she was not taking sides in our relationship, but she also said she believed in fairness, and fairness needed clear records. By the time I left the cafe, I felt like I was carrying more than just my bag. I had the weight of years of small favors and big payments finally taking shape as proof. 2 days later, I walked into Patricia King's office. It was not in a glass tower, but in a mid-sized building with neat plants in the entrance. Her office itself was simple but organized. Shelves with labeled folders, a framed certificate on the wall, a window with a view of a plain street instead of the skyline. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a small, kind smile. She asked how I would like to start. I handed her the folder with the prenup, the notes from my father, the HR documents, the financial records Rena had sent, and a printed copy of Maya's note from our bedroom. Then I talked her through the station night. I kept it calm, no raised voice, no dramatic pauses. I described the drive, the argument, the empty station, the car leaving with my ID still inside. I mentioned the USB, but I did not take it out yet. Patricia listened with a lawyer's face, focused, neutral, absorbing everything. She asked clarifying questions about dates and amounts. She flipped through the prenup slowly, then went back to a certain paragraph and read it twice. She said that whoever drafted this document had been very careful in a simple way. She commented that the part about abandonment was not standard in every agreement, but it was valid. She then pointed out how my father had included a line about one partner leaving the other without essential means of transport or contact on purpose. She looked up at me and said that what happened at the station matched that description very closely. The note at home about symbolic action, the messages about taking time away, and the recordings, if they showed what I said they showed, all supported that. She told me clearly that I was not trapped. She explained that, if I wished, we could start a legal process that reflected not only our shared assets, but also my original contributions and her chosen actions. She also said we did not have to rush. The most important thing for now was to gather and store all possible evidence while it was fresh. Then she asked for the USB drive. I took it out and placed it on the desk. She turned it in her fingers the way I had done, and then handed it to her assistant, who came in after a short call. She asked the assistant to create a secure copy for their system and to prepare a basic summary, not of feelings, but of events. Who was present, what was said, what physical actions took place. Patricia also asked me to forward all the screenshots I had of Maya's online posts about her new era and her unsupportive partner. She said they might matter if the case involved reputation claims later. It was a lot to take in, but her tone kept me steady. She did not speak in big, vague phrases. She explained each step in simple words and wrote notes on a yellow pad as she went. By the end of the meeting, we agreed on a plan. For now, she would review all the documents and wait for the summary of the station recording. I would keep gathering any remaining records and keep track of dates. We would not notify Maya yet. There was no need to turn this into a loud fight when quiet structure would work better. Before I left, I asked Patricia a question that had been on my mind. I asked if leaving me at the station like that counted as a one-time mistake or something more serious in the eyes of the law. She thought for a moment, then said that intent mattered. The note at home calling it symbolic and the online posts about cutting ties showed intent. She said that when a person chooses to make a careless act into a symbol, they accept its meaning. When I walked out of her office, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I finally understood my position. Heavier because the road ahead would not be simple. On my way home, I stopped by the bank branch where our joint account was held. I sat with a representative and calmly asked to separate my salary into a new individual account. I did not close the joint one yet, but I reduced the automatic transfers into it. The representative asked if there was a problem. I said there had been a change in my household and I was reorganizing my finances. That was all. Later, Arthur's advisor called and invited me to a meeting at a trust office. The place was quiet, with glass walls and soft carpet. In the conference room, Arthur joined by video, his voice coming through a small speaker on the table. His advisor explained how a new holding structure could work. It would manage venue rights and certain business agreements for events in the hotels. I would be named as a key figure in that structure, with clear rights over certain bookings and profits. The language was dense, but the idea was simple. My role would no longer be invisible. I signed some initial papers that day, hands steady. They were not final contracts yet, but they started a process. For once, I was not signing for someone else's dream. I was signing for my own position. As I left the building, I checked my phone and saw a new notification. Maya had posted an invitation to a New Era event at the Cole Grand Hotel. Her face was on the banner, smiling, bright, full of the future she believed she was stepping into alone. I looked at the venue name for a long moment. I knew now who truly controlled that space. I also knew that I would not rush to act. The city had taught me over many years that timing mattered. Trucks could leave at the right minute or sit in traffic for hours. People were not so different. For the first time since the station, I felt something settle inside me. It was not rage, it was not sadness. It was a clear, cool line of intention. I would not shout, I would not chase. I would just keep placing the right papers in the right places until the systems Maya admired spoke louder than any of her speeches. The days leading up to Maya's event felt strangely quiet, like the city was holding its breath while I moved papers from one folder to another. At work, my routine stayed the same on the surface. Trucks went out, trucks came back, routes shifted around accidents and road closures. I answered calls, adjusted schedules, and fixed the little problems that never stopped coming. But under that normal layer, something else was building. I had meetings now that no one at the office knew about. I would close my laptop at 5, put on a jacket, and walk out into the early evening with folders in my bag and dates in my head. One evening, I went back to Arthur's penthouse. This time, Patricia was there too. She sat at his long table with her notes spread out, her reading glasses on the end of her nose. Arthur sat at the head, his cane leaning against the chair, his face turned toward the sound of our voices. Patricia spoke first. She said she'd gone through everything: the prenup, the recording summary from the station, the messages, the financial records from Rena, and the early partnership note with my name on it. She laid it all out in calm, clear terms. She said that from a legal point of view, I had been more than a supportive spouse. I had been an early investor and an unacknowledged partner in Maya's business. She said the station incident and the note calling it symbolic matched the abandonment clause that my father had written years before. Her tone was neutral, almost clinical, but I felt the weight of each word. Arthur added a few comments, not as a lawyer, but as someone who had signed many contracts in his life. He said that people liked to pretend feelings ruled the world, but in his experience, paper often carried more weight than emotion. He said I had spent years acting on trust without looking at the paper. Now the paper was catching up. Patricia then talked about timing. She said rushing into a loud legal fight before Maya's event would likely turn everything into a public storm that helped her more than me. She suggested a different approach. We could prepare all documents quietly and choose the right moment to present them, one that would not be easy to spin into a simple story for her followers. She used phrases like procedural steps and formal notice, but what I heard under them was simple. We would use the systems Maya respected most, hotels, contracts, investors, and image, to show the real structure of things. She asked if I was sure I wanted to move forward. I sat for a moment, listening to the faint city noise through the windows. Then I said that being left at a station with no ID had been my line. I could not pretend that had been a small thing. I also said that I did not want to harm her out of spite. I just wanted fairness and truth. Arthur nodded slowly, as if he had been waiting for that exact wording. He said fair and true were good goals. He said if I kept those as my guide, I would be able to live with whatever came next. We agreed on a plan. Patricia would prepare formal filings for divorce and property division under the prenup, including my role in the business and the effect of the abandonment. She would also coordinate with Arthur's team about the new event holding structure tied to his hotels. The goal was not to block Maya's event completely, but to make sure she could not act as if she existed in that space without my shadow. After the meeting, I went home and started sorting my physical life to match the legal change that was coming. I opened drawers and closets and made simple piles, mine, hers, shared. I did not tear anything or throw things in anger. I just placed items in boxes with steady hands. I rented a small, neat apartment through one of Arthur's contacts. It was not fancy, but it was clean and quiet, with white walls and a desk by the window. When the move day came, I ordered a basic moving van and packed my things carefully. Books, clothes, some kitchen items, my file box, a few photos I wanted to keep. In our old apartment, I left a short note on the kitchen counter. No accusations, no long speeches. I wrote the date I was moving out, the address of my new place, and a line saying that from that day on, any matters about the marriage or property should go through Patricia. I signed my name and left the keys on top of the note. Walking out of that door for the last time as a resident felt odd. It was not as painful as I had expected. Maybe I had already left in my mind the night she drove away at the station. This was just my body catching up. At my new apartment, I set up a simple routine. Wake up early, coffee, short walk, work, then files in the evening. Some nights I would open my laptop and watch Maya's public posts without sound, just reading the captions and comments. She was busy promoting the New Era event. There were pictures of mood boards, shots of the ballroom with lights half set, behind-the-scenes clips of her directing staff. In some stories, she said this event would prove she had built something on her own, that she had cut out everything that did not support her future. Comments poured in, calling her brave and independent. I took screenshots and saved them with calm file names. Story 01, Post 03, Caption, New Era. I did not look at them more than once. It was enough that they existed with dates and times. At work, Liam noticed I seemed more focused, not less. He asked one day if things had improved at home. I told him I had moved out and was handling things through a lawyer. I did not go into details. He studied my face, then said he was glad I was not just accepting whatever came. He told me quietly that a calm person who finally draws a line is someone others should be careful with. A week before the event, Patricia called me to meet at the courthouse. The building was old, with stone steps and metal detectors at the entrance. Inside, the air felt a little dry, like paper and old air conditioning. We sat together in a lobby area with wooden benches. Her assistant joined us with a thick folder. Patricia went over the main points one more time, speaking slowly. She explained how the filing laid out the timeline, my savings and property before the marriage, my role in funding and supporting Maya's business, her public statements online, and the abandonment at the station. She described how the prenup terms would guide division of assets and future support. She also explained the part about the business partnership and how that would be addressed. She did not show me every line. She just gave me the key points, the way I would give a summary of a complex delivery route. I signed the necessary lines where she pointed, my hand steady. When it was done, she took the folder to the clerk's window. Watching her walk away with those papers felt like watching the first truck roll out after a long night of planning. You cannot see the whole journey yet, but the route has started. We agreed that formal notice to Maya would be timed carefully. Patricia did not want it to look like a direct attack on her event, but she also did not want to leave too much space for her to move money or rewrite facts. There was a window where the legal and business pieces would line up. That was the window we would use. Around this time, Arthur's team finalized the new holding company for events in his hotels. I met again with Victor, the hotel manager, in a back office at the Cole Grand. He looked tired but sharp, like someone used to handling complex requests under pressure. He explained how the new contracts worked in simple language. The key point was that large events at the Cole Grand and a few other venues would now go through the holding company where I had a defined role. It did not mean I could cancel events on a whim, but it did mean that future agreements with certain agencies, including Maya's, would not be as simple as before. Victor said this was not personal against her. It was a business decision Arthur had made for his own reasons. Still, the timing was not friendly to Maya's idea of being fully independent in that space. As the event day approached, I felt a strange calm growing inside me. I still had moments of sadness when I thought about the early days with Maya, the laughter, the shared hopes, but those moments now sat beside the memory of the station and the note and the empty drawers. They all belonged to the same story. On the morning of the event, I woke up in my new apartment and followed my usual routine. I ate a simple breakfast, checked a few work emails, and laid out my suit. It was the same suit I had worn to some of her earlier events, back when I was just the grounding husband in the background. I took my time getting dressed. I did not rush. When I was ready, I checked that I had what I needed: my phone, my ID, a small folder from Patricia with a few key documents, and a separate envelope she had prepared for Maya. As I stepped out into the hallway, the building was quiet. In the elevator, I watched my reflection in the metal door. I did not look like a hero or a victim. I just looked like a middle-aged man in a suit, going to a hotel. Outside, the city was bright. People were going about their Saturday routines, shopping, meeting friends, walking dogs. I took a taxi to the Cole Grand and watched familiar streets slide by. The hotel stood tall, with glass doors reflecting the sky. Inside, the lobby buzzed with guests. Some wore casual clothes, others were dressed for events. I saw signs pointing to various ballrooms and conference rooms. One sign had Maya's event name on it. With an arrow, I followed the sign until I reached the pre-function corridor outside the main ballroom. Staff members hurried back and forth, carrying trays, cables, and clipboards. Soft music leaked through the closed doors. I could hear a microphone being tested, someone counting into it. Victor spotted me and walked over. He greeted me respectfully and asked if I was ready. I said yes. He told me that Arthur was already in a side room and that Patricia was on her way. He also mentioned that many important guests and potential investors were inside, waiting for the program to start. I stood there for a moment, feeling the textured carpet under my shoes, the cool air from the vents, the faint buzz of voices just beyond the door. Somewhere on the other side of that wall, Maya was moving through her final checks, confident that this night would prove her story about herself. I adjusted my tie, drew a slow breath, and tightened my grip on the small folder in my hand. The systems she admired were in motion now. I had helped set them up, step by step. All that remained was to walk through the door when it was time. A staff member opened the ballroom door for me, and warm light washed over the corridor. I stepped inside and stood at the back for a moment, letting my eyes adjust. The room was full. Round tables, white cloths, tall centerpieces. A stage at the front with a screen behind it showing Maya's logo and the words, "New Era." Soft music played under the low murmur of conversation. People held glasses and smiled at each other in that particular way people do when they think they are watching the rise of something important. Maya moved from table to table near the front. She wore a fitted dress and a bright smile. A camera person followed her, catching short clips for later posts. Every time she laughed, people around her laughed too. She looked completely sure of herself, like the night belonged to her. I stayed where I was, near the back wall. No one noticed me at first. To them, I was just another man in a dark suit. Maybe support staff, maybe a forgotten guest. It felt almost fitting. Victor approached and spoke quietly. He said the program would start in a few minutes. He told me that Arthur and Patricia were in a side area near the stage, ready when needed. I nodded. My hand rested on the folder inside my jacket. The house lights dimmed slightly, and the host walked onto the stage. He greeted the crowd, welcomed sponsors, praised Maya for her vision. He talked about her journey from nothing to building a thriving brand on her own. The audience clapped warmly at that. I felt the words slide over me like cold water. Then Maya joined him on stage. The spotlight softened on her face. She spoke into the microphone with steady confidence. She told her version of the story, the one I had already seen in pieces online. She said she had carried her dream alone, against doubt and fear. She said she had cut out anything that held her back. The room drank it in like a prepared script. At the end of her speech, she hinted at a special partner who had believed in her new era and who would help her rise to the next level. She did not look toward the back of the room. She did not expect the special partner to come from there. The host announced that the surprise supporter would now join them. Arthur's name appeared on the screen. There was a ripple through the crowd. People straightened in their chairs. They knew that name. Arthur walked slowly toward the stage with his cane, guided by an assistant. The room stood and clapped. Maya smiled wide and reached out to greet him at the steps. She looked proud, as if this moment proved that she had reached the circle she deserved. Arthur thanked the crowd in a calm voice. He said it was good to see so many faces who cared about serious work, not just good pictures. Then he did something no one expected. He turned his face slightly toward the back of the room and said he wanted someone else beside him. He named me. At first, there was a small pause. People looked around, trying to spot who he meant. Then Victor touched my arm and gave a short nod. My legs felt heavy but steady as I walked down the central aisle. Conversations went quiet as I passed. A few people who knew me from earlier events blinked in surprise. I climbed the steps and stood near Arthur. The lights were bright and warm. I could see the confusion in Maya's eyes, hidden under her public smile. She greeted me in a low voice and asked what I was doing there. I answered simply that I was standing where I belonged. Arthur spoke again, this time to explain why he had called me up. He told the room that his holding company had created a new event structure, one designed to protect venues, investors, and workers. He said I had joined that structure as a key figure because of my long experience in operations and planning. His tone was steady, not grand, but the content made people shift in their seats. He went on to say that major events in his hotels, including the Cole Grand, would now pass through this structure. He explained that rights, approvals, and profit shares would be handled with more care. He did not use my name in every sentence, but he mentioned that my signature would matter for certain contracts. I watched Maya process this. Her smile stayed frozen for a moment too long. The story she had told about doing this on her own did not match the new facts on stage. While Arthur spoke, Patricia moved through the side of the room with a small team. She reached Maya's table and invited her to a small signing area at the edge of the stage. There, she handed over a neat stack of documents in a folder with Maya's full name on it. Patricia explained, in a voice just loud enough to carry to the front rows, that these documents covered the legal side of things: the marriage, the business ties, the prenup, the abandonment at the station, the early partnership note, the financial records. She did not show the crowd every page, but she gave enough detail that people understood this was not a small matter. Maya tried to object. She said she had built her agency herself, that this was her night. Patricia stayed calm. She pointed to dates, signatures, and clauses. She mentioned the recording from the station, the note that called the act symbolic, and the messages about cutting ties. She described how those actions triggered terms my father had written long ago. Around us, the room had gone very still. Investors, clients, friends, everyone watched not a speech now, but a correction. Some people took out their phones and lowered them again, unsure if it was wise to record. Victor stepped up to the microphone and, in a clear voice, confirmed that the hotel would of course honor tonight's event as planned. Then he added that all future bookings with Maya's agency would need to be reviewed and approved under the new structure, where I had a role. He thanked her for her past work, but made it clear that the system had changed. The words hung in the air. The story of a self-made rise now had visible cracks. The partner she had erased stood on the stage beside the man whose venues she had tried to claim as her own platform. I did not raise my voice. I did not deliver a speech. When the host looked at me, I simply said that I wished everyone a good evening and that all further questions about contracts or assets should go through Patricia. Then I stepped back. At a small side table, I saw my own copy of the signed legal documents. I placed my pen down beside them and slipped my access badge for the hotel's back corridors next to it. No longer needed. As I walked off the stage, the music faded out mid-track, and the crowd parted. I did not look back. The last thing I felt was the cool air of the ballroom on my face and the weight of nothing in my hands.